right before we started, the speaker that night goes, "Hey man, could you all do this song on the end, the offertory? I'm going to speak about 20 minutes." And we're like, "Oh yeah, sure." Can we go backstage? Like, I don't remember do you remember what key it is? I don't know what key it's in. So we play the song. We're kind of closing our eyes, and he's doing an invitation, so lights are a little dim. And when we got done, it was just dead silence. And you look out, and there's people crying and people standing up. There were some people, laying on the floor worshiping, and you're just like, what? They didn't do that in the big house, auto adrenaline joke. At that point, we realized, okay, this is going to be something that's bigger than us that we're going to do from then on.
This podcast explores stories of people who invest their lives to serve others. The topics and interviews in this show are intended to inspire all of us to live our best story so others can fully discover the kingdom effect. Hey guys, welcome back to the Kingdom Effect. This is episode 11, and it's going to be a good one. We've got Jim Bryson with us today. Good friend of mine, probably one of my few best friends over the last few years. Thrilled to have him. He used to be on the road with MercyMe. As a matter of fact, I wish we had it to play right now. Maybe I'll edit it in. But that little piano lick at the very beginning of I Can Only Imagine, I've always said that's probably the most recognized few notes on the piano, and at least in Christian music for sure. It was Jim Bryson. So welcome, Jim.
Thanks.
Good to have you. And then we also have my big buddy. I've kind of like latched onto this intro. My big buddy, Glenn Buckshot Buckley, here tonight. So what's up, Glenn?
Am I your second best friend?
Well, you also are my best friend, so
can you really have two BFFs? I mean, girls have the rank system. Yeah. Guys like, oh,
right, yeah.
We're good friends, all right.
Yeah, it's just you can. There's lots of best friends, and it's kind of geographic. So maybe Jim is my best friend in Auburn, Alabama.
There you go.
Yeah,
I'm your best friend in West Tennessee.
That's right.
Yeah,
that sounds like a good lyrics for a country song.
So we're excited to have Jim. We're going to talk about whatever comes up tonight, but we particularly want to ask Jim about the early days of MercyMe. It's funny. I owned a furniture store in Columbus, Georgia. I would go over to Columbus, and every day, right at 12 o'clock on the dot, the local, it's kind of like I don't know what you call it, but the radio station that plays music from all the decades, and they play, the top 40 since forever. So every day at noon that I Could Only Imagine would come on, which was so cool because it wasn't a Christian station. It was just a secular station. But that's a big deal.
You never told me this story.
No, yeah, every day at noon, the same thing. And, I don't know how radio stations work, but apparently they have a playlist, and that's what time you hit the playlist. So it's pretty cool to have a song that, you guys did definitely not intend to go on the secular charts, that made it all the way pretty high up the charts. So we'll talk about that. But Jim, also tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days, Jim.
I'm a stunt double for Tom Cruise.
We can tell by looking at you if you're watching Facebook Live.
Yeah, except hair's not implanted as much. Yeah. And no, I own a retail store. When I worked for Kevin, make a really long story as short as possible, he approached me about running a paint department, and it uses anti-Sloan chalk paint. So it's a furniture paint, and you can transform anything. Most of the ladies that have done DIY have heard of chalk paint. This is a lady that invented it. So did it for Kevin, 5.5 years, give or take. And then when he left the industry, I went and opened my own store and been doing that for another 3 years-ish, like that. So now I'm in downtown Opelika, Alabama, in a really cool vintage 1880s storefront.
It is super cool. It really is. Would you have I don't know.
No,
10 years ago, right? 10 years ago. Right. Yeah.
It's because I sell fabrics and home decor, man. Right. It is about as opposite from a band as you get. So.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's funny where life takes us, for sure.
That's true.
But yeah,
we're going to talk about. Matter of fact, we even have my own custom Market Street.
Oh wow!
and we couldn't figure out a name. I'm like, it's not like you want to call it turpentine. That's not really, or mineral spirits candle, So our working name was The Candle. And then when we made it, we're like, well, let's just keep it because that's kind of stupid fun. So there you go. That's what I do is I readjust my chair.
So how can they find you? I guess Facebook's the best place to find the shop.
Yeah. So it's Market Street Paint Shop. Facebook, Instagram, do have a YouTube channel, but it's mainly just posting and reposting other video ads. Videos from other stockists and whatnot. If you're downtown Opelika, come see us. But if you're in Alabama, come see us. If you're in the world, come see us. We ship and all those kind of fun things. But it's kind of a fun, quaint shop. Kevin got to come by. What was it? 3-4 weeks ago?
Yeah, something like that.
When you're in town, yeah. So it was good to get a little feedback from the old boss man.
Yeah, I had no idea what you did, and so when you first got on the video, I'm like, is this guy really jumping on the live podcast from Lowe's, Home Depot?
Well, in all honesty, I would have done it from home, but I have a miniature weenie dog, and if you've ever been around a weenie dog, a train can go by and bark, a leaf can go by and bark. And so it would literally, I'd be talking to you and you'd the whole time. So I thought I'd better do it from the store where it's a little quieter.
That's funny. Well, it was funny. How long ago did the movie come out? Imagine 3 or 4 years ago, 4 years ago, probably 4 at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it came out, you actually had someone on the movie that was playing you. I always thought that was the weirdest thing. And you actually got to meet the guy, right?
Yeah. So kind of back up a little bit. We had a lady approach us with an idea for a screenplay. When that song took off, anybody and everybody wanted to get involved somehow. And most of them were legit, but it was like, hey, we've got this ministry, we've got this. And so this lady came up, I'll write a screenplay. We're like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. Being nice to her, and who knew? A few years later, she actually got it. They got the Irwin brothers, which, are pretty well known. They're based in Birmingham, so just up the road. So my manager called me up, and this is a couple of years after I left the band, and said, hey, man, they're actually doing the movie. And one of the directors, Andy, wants to meet you. So went up to Birmingham and met him. And he goes, dude, you're the first one I cast. I was like, what? I said, you never even met me. And he goes, all the guys told me about it. And within 5 seconds, I knew. And it's a guy that he had used in several other movies, Mom's Night Out and some of these others. He's been in tons of movies. I mean, tons of commercials. You'd recognize him if you saw him. But he actually, we're brothers.
Yeah.
We've didn't even know it. We're brothers. So he does a 3-way call, calls up Randy and gets me on the phone, introduces us, and we just start finishing each other's sentence. And after about 5 minutes, he goes, all right, you guys have fun talking. I'll catch you later. And he hangs up. We talked for 2.5 hours and nonstop. So when I went to see the screen, the first screening, it was something like 4 hours, 5 hours long. They got to just keep chopping to, shorten it. And I was like, it was like looking in a mirror.
Yeah.
The other guys that covered and acted like the guys, some parts were pretty close. Some parts were like, that's not even what they would do. But when everybody saw the movie, I mean, everybody, and I'm not just saying a couple, everybody came and said, dude, did you train him personally? Like, what in the world? Here's the best part. So they did a screening or a release here in Auburn, and Kevin kind of set up at the local radio station because it wasn't going to play here. It's kind of limited theaters. So they called and the movie AMC, got it in there. So my kids had not seen a version of it. So I've got them in the audience, and Kevin and I kind of did a little question and answer. So we walk up and sit, and I did this. The movie's this way, and I did this. And just watch my kids' reaction. And I've never seen them horse laugh, cry. And they're going, oh my God, how kids make fun of you while enjoying it. And and so people started turning around and watching my kids because they were laughing harder at the kids than they were the movie. Yeah. So it was a pretty surreal thing. And he and I are always bantering back and forth. He lives out in Hollywood. And so he just, he's always involved in something. Yeah. And he's even done some NASCAR commercials. Oh, cool. And I'm a big race fan, huge race fan. And he just, is always tagging me. I'm like, I could have done that. I could have done that better. You would know. He does Allstate commercials, and he's real. He makes me look obese, and he is so skinny. But he's really just goofy acting. So he always fits that stigma.
There's a scene in the movie where the phone's ringing, right? And he's like, phone.
Yeah, the phone's ringing. It's Amy Grant calling Bart. And so it starts ringing, and I just look at it and like, phone.
Which is totally something you would do in real life.
Yeah, it's like, phone, here, I'll get it. Here, I'll get Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, you got it. Thanks. Just making someone else get up and do it. And literally, when we saw the screening in Nashville, it was all our old crew guys and people growing up and whatever. And they're all just looking at me like, how did they nail this part? And I'm like, dude, he hadn't even met me. Everybody else had met their characters. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or, we have the same mom. We just didn't know it. So yeah, he's cool dude.
I wonder who would play Kevin. I'm thinking the guy from Taken. What's his name?
I'm thinking Charles Barkley.
Maybe Tom. Maybe the Tom Hanks, Forrest Gump. I don't know, version of Tom Hanks.
I can see that.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, back to Jim. Tell us a little bit about, like, I've heard you tell a few stories before about the song "I Can Only Imagine," and it didn't start where it ended up, right? Like, how did the whole thing kind of come to pass? I remember you telling me that it started out, you tried to do it as a fast song and it didn't work. I thought that was fascinating background.
It was well, we were. A lot of people think we're this overnight success because Imagine was on our first release, and most people don't have a career song on their first album. What people didn't realize, we were independent for 6 years. We started in 1994. And we had there's a 4-year run where we did 250 shows a year. So we were, really hitting it. So I have a recording engineer degree. Used to work in recording studios. Having a recording background, we were able to record our own albums. And literally we set up wherever we could. I had some gear and we'd borrow some. So we set up in a First Baptist Church, Greenville, Texas, in Sunday school rooms, literally. And then we'd run the drums in somewhere else. Bart had written the song really in like 15 minutes one night on the bus. And we're like, it's pretty cool. It's, it's about his dad and had a memory, but for him, but we had never, ever met his dad. In the movie, it shows Bart leaving and going back in the middle of the band, but in reality, we had never met him. He died before we ever got together. On that song, it was it was an independent, our fourth album. It was basically our own version of worship songs, but their original worship songs. We had done a couple albums before that we did our own covers, of Singers Love Forever and, those kind of things. When we did this one, Bart had an idea of, I can only imagine, and doing whatever. And we kept trying to force it. It's like, man, it's not flowing. So we tried it, and then, okay, we'll come back to it. And we did some other songs, and after a while, we're just like, I don't know if that's going to work. So I was talking to him. I said, what if we slowed it down and did kind of more of a ballad? We literally went through it once and then laid it down. And it was kind of one of those things where like, okay, that's cool. And then we never played it again because we were doing worship songs. We were playing lots of camps, Disciple Nows, those kind of things, youth weekends. And that was more of a not so sing-along type song, So we're doing a camp in Windermere, Missouri. And I remember because that's the camp I actually grew up going to. And you talk about weird sitting in the audience for years, and then you get up on stage, you're like, wow, this is exactly the same. That hymnal is the same one right there. Right before we started, the speaker that night goes, hey, man, could you all do this song on the offertory? I'm going to speak about 20 minutes. And we're like, oh, yeah, sure. So he gets up after we do our intro set. He goes up to speak, and we go backstage like, I don't remember do you remember what key it is? I don't know. What's the tempo? Went back to the product table, got a cassette. Shows you how long it goes. Put it in a jam box, and we had to relearn the song because a lot of times when you record it, you just work on the parts there, and then you're done. You don't ever play it again. We come out, we're kind of nervous, and Bart, had even written the lyrics down on a piece of paper and set it down by his feet. We had kind of cheat sheets, and it's not like it's hard. It's 3 chords and a 4th chord at the end, but you're just like, okay, how many times you go through it? So we played the song. We're kind of closing our eyes, and he's doing an imitation, so lights are a little dim. And when we got done, it was just dead silence. And we're like, oh, that was horrible. No one gonna, and you look out and there's people crying and people standing up. There were some people, laying on the floor worshiping, and you're just like, what? They didn't do that in the big house, auto adrenaline joke. At that point, we realized, okay, this is going to be something that's bigger than us that we're going to do from then on. And the only times we never, ever played it was when we did GMA week, and they had us do a showcase just to have fun with the industry. We played 3 songs and didn't do it. And they're all like, hey, this good. Are they coming back? What happened? They're trying to, figure it out. So it was one of those songs that we just had no idea was going to do what it did.
You mentioned earlier going from before we started recording, you can remember playing for like 13 people, and then you guys played shows where you had like 150,000. So what was that like? Like just to look out and see that many people.
It's a progression. If we would have formed the band, signed a deal, and then the first show you're playing these giant things, it would have freaked us out. And there's been some bands that have done that the record label kind of put together. But we had done enough stuff with youth groups and local stuff. We started in Oklahoma City, is where we formed the band. So we knew some college ministries. We'd lead, for 30, 40. So you just kind of build up. But the camp of 13, literally, it was a church. I think it was a Methodist church out of Washington, D.C. There's a guy we knew from another ministry, and 13 kids, and they went to Florida, and we literally went down and played 13 kids, which we loved because we kept in a lot of. They came in with like ear piercing, eyebrow piercings, and a little different than Oklahoma City, that we were used to. And so you do that, you invest in the kids. Then as you get bigger and you sign, it's kind of hard because you don't get to interact with everybody like you used to. We do these summer camps. A lot of them we'd do 6, 8, 10 years in a row. And so you saw the kids start out in 6th grade and you'd see them as a senior. So it's neat to see that progression, but you build a relationship with all the adults. And, when the kids are in bed, y'all go sneak out and go eat at Waffle House, those kind of things. And it was a progression in that. But then when Imagine took off, it started going into a whole nother level. I knew we had made it when I walked into Hobby Lobby and I heard
a Muzak version of I Can Only Imagine.
So it sounds weird, but the most amazing thing to me, concert wise, my dad was a Baptist minister growing up. We went to every Billy Graham crusade that ever came through Missouri. So I grew up just going as a kid, never realizing, it's Billy Graham. We're going to another crusade. And then as you get older, you kind of realize. So the first show we ever met him, and I have my hand shaking. They got a picture of me shaking, introducing myself to Billy, and just like, oh. And it was in Kansas City, which is where I grew up, outside of Kansas City, at Arrowhead Stadium. And I am a Chiefs nut. So I'm like at Arrowhead with Billy Graham. And, I'm like, I could die a happy man. So that was one of those moments you're like, wow, this is crazy. But the crazy one was when we got to play Billy's last crusade. And I'm literally, they set us on the stage, and it's us, Michael W. Smith, and a couple of his people, and then Billy like 8 feet away speaking his last thing. And my parents were passed away by then, but I'm like, man, how cool would that have been to see mom and dad? They would have been so excited from that standpoint to see what God had done. Not us. We're average musicians. Matter of fact, when we started, Mike had only been playing guitar like 2 years.
Wow.
So we were not these seasoned guys. He was 19, right at 1 year out of high school.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty crazy when you look back on it.
So of all the places you played, all the people you met, all the different cities you were in around the world, literally, what's one that pops to the top of your mind other than the Billy Graham crusade?
One of the crazy things is when Imagine crossed over into mainstream. I mean, when it was big and Christian, you expected to do the Dove Awards and all these, but it made it number 4 on the adult contemporary chart. And one of the weirdest things when they asked us to present at the AMAs awards, and it's for the adult contemporary category, and Sheryl Crow won. And you're walking out on stage, and Jimmy Kimmel introduces this, and you're just like, what? Backstage, I'm getting my makeup because you got to do that when you go on TV. And I look over, and the left of me is Diana Ross, and the right of me is William Shatner, and you're just like, "Bring me up, Scotty." You want to just say that, but of course you didn't. And then we come out, and that you go out to present. Bart and Barry talk. And so I was the last one. I just kind of walked out, and you look out and you see all these people. And you're just like, how in the world are we here? We're a Christian band playing a blatantly Christian song. And matter of fact, when Jimmy Kimmel goes, yeah, this band's had whatever. They're nice guys. Leave them alone. Like, just and everybody's laughing like, oh yeah, they're Christians. Don't get near them. You'll go. And you're just like, man, this is a really surreal experience. And then we went to the after party, and it was at the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is legendary. And walk in, and there's Tony Bennett, Paris Hilton, and Carrie Underwood. And because we were on our mainstream distribution was done by Sony, and so we're there. And I got excited because I got my picture with Weird Al Yankovic.
Oh man, yeah. Bucket list.
So, yeah, exactly. But it's just it was weird. That's where we knew it was a God thing, because why else would we have been there? And we would go do these interviews with mainstream stations, and they would be just scared of us, like we were going to come levitating in the Bible and shaking the holy water. And we're nervous because we're afraid they're going to try to corner us and ask us, some controversial question. And then they realized we're just normal dudes, and it really allowed us to speak the gospel on mainstream airways. And a lot of them we came to, they'd come to our shows. These mainstream DJs that were shock jocks, a lot of them, and they'd come to our show, and so it was pretty cool to see all that.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite bands is a band called Need to Breathe. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but yeah. I think in their early days they started out labeling themselves as a Christian band, and then I guess dropped that identity or that label and got more into the mainstream distribution, as you were talking about. But you can still hear their hearts and their faith in their music and their lyrics. There was some issues with some other Christian artists just in the past. Switchfoot, yeah, a lot of those guys. So my question is, what is the pressure as a Christian artist to what's the tension? What's the internal battle of, do we label ourselves as a Christian band and perhaps limit ourselves on distribution or our message reaching more people, right? Or do we just stay Christians in a mainstream environment?
It was a no-brainer for us. We were kind of like dance with the one that brung you kind of thing. We started out playing camps and doing worship. So ours is a little bit different because we were blatantly Christian, and then a blatantly Christian song crossed over to mainstream and the country charts and all these things. Like Switchfoot was one of the first ones that and you can go even farther back, but that's probably the ones that most of us would remember. They were actually represented by our manager, Scott Brickle. He's the guy in the movie with the big giant beard. So he had represented them when they were blatantly Christian, but I think they saw some other avenues, and John and those guys are great guys, but they saw if they didn't label themselves Christian, they would get in some other doors. And is that right or wrong? I don't think it's any matter if you're getting the gospel out there. Christ went into all the places he went. What's the difference with them getting the label? Now, the controversy would be more of Christian bookstores and the Christians themselves, like, oh, heaven forbid, they're, blah, blah, blah. We have to pull them out of the bookstores. You look at all the different, Amy Grant, when they yanked her out, and Sandy Patty and whatever. It's like, man, if you yanked out, somebody that offended you some way, there ain't gonna be no Christian artists on the shelves. I think the unique thing was it was just starting to be acceptable, because Christian music for a while, the quality was pretty low. You would hear it and you could just go, it's Christian. Then the quality caught up. So it could play on the radio. It could get on TV, like the Afters. That's a good example. They're really good friends of ours. Matter of fact, they opened for us in Dallas at a show, and we told our record label, like, you need to check these guys out. And then they ended up getting signed. And they have been on so many MTV shows and movie soundtracks that it'd make your head spin. But they're still Christian band. But, Amazing Grace is on, so it's like, where's that line? And I think it's more people stirring it up and making it a big deal than it isn't. And it's Christian band. Well, is that a band of Christians? The typical thing. To me, it was big back then. Now it's not as big a deal, especially with Michael W. Smith back on Place in This World. He crossed over. Amy Grant, Age to Age. Not to Age, Baby Baby, and a bunch of those songs that really took off. And even that was, controversial back in the day. And you're like, man, it's getting people to listen, go, oh, let me check out this girl. Oh, it's a Christian band. Oh, what's this other band that's a Christian band? If it's getting the word out there, and she's awesome.
You're talking about, the kind of the progression of Christian music. I can remember when I was a teenager, we had Carmen, DC Talk, Jars of Clay, and that was about it. I remember when the Flood video played on MTV.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. And I remember youth pastors going, oh man, are they going secular now? Or that, Kevin and I have a lot of guests on the show that are involved in ministries where the church kind of is not against the ministry. They just kind of keep it at arm's length because it's, we don't really want to go in there. We'll write you a check, but we don't, other than that, we just want to kind of keep it at arm's length. And I think, again, my favorite bands Need to Breathe, and not just because of their faith, but they just do good music. It's kind of music, like the lyrics I like. But to me, if I try to put myself in their shoes or any artist's shoes, I just think, man, whether I'm labeled as a Christian artist or a mainstream artist, my faith's not going to change. Hopefully,
Yeah.
So to me, it doesn't matter. I agree with what you said. I think a lot of that controversy comes from the church and Christians who just don't.
It's not coming from the mainstream side, I guarantee you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't care if they like the music, they like the music. Yeah. So, Christian music industry is the only industry defined by lyrics. Mm-hmm. Rap is a style and all this, but Christian music could be, I grew up, I'm fairly older than you. I'm 54. So I grew up Striper. Yeah. It was one of those where everybody voted on MTV and it was the top 10. So whoever voted, you got to dial in, on a rotary dial and whatever number. And Striper was number one for weeks on MTV. And this is when MTV was the real stuff. It wasn't all the, stupid reality shows or whatever they have now. That was one of those where I realized how different that changed me talking to my friends. And what I mean by that is I had several friends that were in high school and we grew up from kindergarten, so we knew each other really well. And they would say, oh man, I love this. Oh man, I love Judas Priest. I love Black Sabbath, Metallica, whatever. And you're like, oh man, have you heard this band, Striper? So I took a bunch of my friends that were not going to go to a Christian show and went to Striper. And the first time I saw them was on the Yellow Black Attack. It was right after that hit. 300 people in the audience. And here's the cool thing about Striper. A lot of people don't know. They have boxes and boxes of New Testaments. It's got a Striper sticker. And during the show, they'd throw them out. And here's these kids smoking weed, doing whatever, diving, fighting each other to get a Bible. But yet the Christian's like, oh, I can't believe they're there. Really? When was the last time you went out and handed some dude with, nose rings and, spiked hair or whatever, a Bible? So that's the way I look at it. If it's getting the word out about what Christ is, doesn't matter the platform. Now, are they still who they're supposed to be? Are they being the level of a Christian they're supposed to be? Every one of them I've met have been. Now, again, it's like anything. If you dig deep enough in anybody's closet, you're going to find skeletons. Now, is that skeleton worthy to crucify him? I ain't throwing darts first.
Yeah. I used to work in a Christian bookstore when I was, just got out of high school. And
what year was this?
This was 99.
Yeah.
Wow. Young.
So yeah, this was before streaming,
7.
Yeah. And so like if you wanted Christian music, that was the only place you could get it. Yeah. But I remember, being a retail salesman, somebody would come in and is just kind of browsing through the CDs. Who do you listen to? Well, I listen to Metallica, or okay, well this Christian band is, kind of in that same genre. And so back then, like, I can remember asking people that.
Well, there's about 4 different books, and I have all 4 of them that compare. If you like Hall & Oates, here's the bands, and literally, and it was great to show my friends. But yeah.
Nowadays, of course, Apple Music and Amazon Music and all the streaming,
anything and everything. Well, not
anything and everything.
But anything and everything you want is at the kid's fingertip.
Gosh, I remember when Christian rap came out, or at least got big. Man, Lecrae and some of those other guys.
Way back, new thing.
Yeah.
DC Talk, or even DC Talk, DC Talk.
Gosh, I remember when the song Jesus Freak came out. That was a big deal in church.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the first Christian albums that you could play on mainstream radio, and the quality of the budget, you're just like, it used to be Christian radio played, and you just like make your eye twitch, for quality.
I can remember my parents going with me to a DC Talk concert, but my parents, being old school Southern Baptist, I was shocked they took me, because one of the genre of music, and I don't mean Christian, I mean, the rock. And then second, I mean, Jesus and Freak in the same sentence with my dad would have been like, So
yeah, my dad was a Baptist minister. And my parents were born in 1924. So they were 44 years old when they had me. So when I was in high school, they were, late 50s, early 60s, as we went through. And I remember one time I was jamming, out, and I had some speakers just rattle in my room, and it was Stryper. And my mom walked by and she goes, "So that's a Christian band?" I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "So they're singing about, and I kind of explained. She goes, "All right, as long as they're singing about Christ," and walked off. And, gray-haired mama, and I told her, I said, I used to buy albums, like not cassettes. I would buy album because it had the lyrics and it had the credits and pictures and all that, and you could follow along. And a lot of the, like, especially Petra and some of those back, in the day, they had scripture verses below the lyrics of based, what it was on. So like Petra, a good example, Bema Seat. I was like, "What's the Bema Seat?" And I'm flipping through the Bible, going to all this stuff. So it got me to read, because unfortunately, being in the church raised, after a while, it's like, blah, 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 blah. You're not, this isn't this fresh thing. You've heard it your whole life. So you're kind of like, and like Stryper, Isaiah 53:5, by his stripes we are healed, and so I could show my friends this that were metalheads, and, and some of them later in life talked about it to me, like, "Man, that was really cool. That really influenced me." Like you could go to a concert and not be drunk.
was it Stryper that did "To Hell with the Devil"?
Yeah, and that was the song. That one and Honestly were the ones that went to #1 on MTV. And you're sitting there, so it's literally, Metallica, Motley Crue, all these bands, girls, and then Stryper comes up, and you're like, yeah. Again, the mainstream people accepted it. And some of the Christians are like, "Oh, well, they're wearing spandex and playing loud. They're turning to 11. They're not going to go to heaven." You realize how interesting Christians can be. Most people look at it, and every age group is reached differently. When we were going, we had a youth group room, and I remember there was I can't remember who it was in the church, but they had a bunch of couches and stuff in their office, and they did something else, and they were going to get rid of it, and they were just going to, give it away. And we're like, "No, let's put it in the youth room. We want to put up posters and make it kind of vibey and put down a, carpet." And they're like, "Well, it should be just no different than." I said, "Yeah, but here's the deal." And I did this at a church meeting. I stood up, and, even though everybody knew me, I'm like, I didn't talk in public like that. So I said, "I've got friends that if you have a cool looking youth room, they're more apt to come than if you're sitting in pews and opening hymnals. If you're playing music and you got concert posters." And that's how I'd get a lot of my friends. Our church would take a bus, and we'd go up to Kansas City, and we'd go to all these concerts. To show you my age, the first concert I remember that was actually at a real place was Andre Crouch, the Disciples, and the Imperials. And it was like, what? And so our church group would always go up. And so I'd invite a bunch of my friends that didn't regularly attend church. And they were like, "Oh, I didn't know Christian music could be." I thought it was like, don't, Southern gospel or whatever. And they're pyro and lights and all this, but still give a good message.
It's interesting too. A couple of years ago, I had a chance to meet Brian Head Welch. He came and did an interview where I work. But man, that joker, like, hard heavy metal, known for just awful dark things back in the day. But I'm telling you, I have no one that as a stranger has ever hugged me like as intently and kindly, and with as much generosity as that guy. So that's a whole different level of this guy. He's still playing some music that is questionable, but like he's just got this salt to the earth.
Well, but if you go on YouTube, so check this out. Now that you kind of know his story, go on YouTube And there's all kinds of videos of him going out in the lobby or other places, and you got these metalheads at these shows, and he'll go
Yeah,
up and
totally.
lay hands on people and pray for them, and they're like, "What in the world?" But they
Yeah.
accept it because it's him.
And
He's
you know,
part
he
of them, and that's
took a couple
where.
years off for that reason, just to kind of get his head on screwed on straight, and he really honestly will tell you straight up, like God told him to go back to the mission field, and that being his mission field. So we've talked about, I think we've talked on the podcast before about Michael Chandler, the MMA champion. Same thing. He like gets in the ring and for 2 rounds, he's
Pummels someone within
totally
inches of life.
beats their
Yeah,
head
bless you,
into
my
the
son.
mat, and then comes off. And with him, I said, how do you do that? Like, and how do you reconcile that with faith? And he said, well, the thing is, when we get out of the ring, we're best buddies. Some of those guys are believers, and we pray together. And there's so much that your perception of things versus reality sometimes don't line up. I think it's crazy.
Well, it's like Jim said a while ago. You Christian artist, Christian MMA fighter, Christian. You put that Christian label on you, and there's so many people out there that just look to you to be perfect, like without fault whatsoever. And that's just simply not what it is.
Yeah, and even beyond that, it's like being able somehow to separate what you do from having all the words that people would expect you to say or whatever the things. It's like sometimes being the best you could possibly be at whatever you do is what's honoring to God. Like picking out the gifts that God gave you and just crafting them to the point where you're at that high level, like you're a champion or you're top of the charts of whatever you're doing. That in itself can be honoring to God. So it's fascinating to think about for sure. What about Jim? Like I've asked you this before, but I don't know. You said, you're sitting on the stage with Billy Graham and you're just looking across and thinking, how the heck did we get here? Or, at the music awards, how does, like, for so many people that just gets to them. Like, I don't know, but for you, I don't know. That's one of the things I've always loved about you is it's never really seemed to get to you. But do you see that? Like, is there a temptation to think you're bigger than life or that you in your own efforts have accomplished something?
Anytime any of us would get a big head, which really wasn't very often, the others would smack us around, or you just, you come back to the house and you're like, oh, got to change the diaper and mow the yard and whatever it is. And you realize, oh, no, I'm just a dude. Now, some of those times when those guys would come up, especially athletes and stuff, way younger than us, at the time, and they'd come up and they're, oh, dude, I listen to you, I love you, and you're just like, yeah, okay, and like Ben Roethlisberger, he's gone through some rough stuff over the years, but he's a strong Christian. And matter of fact, when the guys were playing around, Pittsburgh, I don't remember how long ago it was, he invited him over the house, and they hung out and got to know him. And so there's a lot of guys that live it behind the scenes, and that's, they're doing it and living it the right way. They're not, overdoing it, so to speak. Now, where's that balance? To me, it all comes in the presentation and how people are watching you off the field, or stage or whatever it may be. And when you would get in those places, it was such a gradual thing, when like, the Tonight Show, we played that 2 different times, with Jay Leno. And when they called the first time, we're like, what? No, they don't want us, on there. And you go on there, and this is one of the things that really kind of touched me in a way. We got done, because you go through rehearsals and they're making sure they got all the camera shots, and you're playing the song, and they record it, and you go into the booth and play it back like, okay, is this how you're kind of wanting it to sound? So and that's all done with whatever the crew. And then when they actually film it is when Jay comes out. So now he came in our dressing room met us before, and that dude just woke up from a nap. His hair's like this. Hey guys, oh, man, I'm glad to have, it's really, really cool dude. But what grabbed me about that whole thing was the music director, or the one that picked the talent, the musicians to come in, all these different bands, was a Jewish atheist. So he had that background, but didn't believe it. It was Hollywood, we're out in LA and, in that environment. And when we got done, we were so nice to the crew and thanked them, like when they'd hand us, a microphone. Hey, thanks, dude. Hey, what's your name? And shaking their hand and you're tearing down and helping them gather up chords. They came up and said, wow, man, you talked to us. Like, well, yeah. And they said, well, most musicians and artists that, you can't even look at them in the eye. And another example, we were playing a show and it was a little like a hallway that went back to the dressing rooms, but it was like a hallway parallel with the main one. So it was really narrow, maybe 4 or 5 feet wide. And there was a guy in there sitting, attendant, that was worked for the venue, sitting in a chair. And we walked by and he would look down and he would stand up and look down. And, once or twice, you're like, oh, okay. And about the third time, you're like, dude, you ain't got to stand up. When we walked by, we're just, well, sir, I didn't know what the protocol was. He was talking to our manager. And he's like, what do you mean protocol? And he goes, well, a couple of weeks ago, Mariah Carey was in here. We couldn't look at her in the eye. And then Elton John was here a week before that, and everybody had to leave the hallway before he would enter. And we're like, dude, we'd hug him. We'd bring him chips and sandwiches. And like, hey, man, we sit down and talk to him. And he was just like blown away. And that's where I realized that's where the real ministry was. If you get them in that place, they'll listen to what you're presenting them. Because we were so nice to the guys on the Jay Leno show, they begged the director, and that person loved us, and they had us come back a second time. And the first time they wanted us to play, they were very picky, like, okay, it's Christmas season. So we played the song off of our first Christmas album. And then when we came back second time, they said, well, play whatever you want off one of your albums. And so we got to play So Long Self. Once you validated yourself, whether it was DJs or TV shows or whatever, then they would be like, oh yeah, you're cool, come on back. And that was the biggest compliment to me, was becoming friends with them. And then not, you're coming in, you got an angle or something going on. They just like, oh, you're cool dude too. You're normal. You're not like I said, come levitating in, throwing holy water at everybody.
Yeah. It's so cool that you guys had that platform to interact with that many people. So most of, no one probably listening knows that behind the scenes, Jim Bryson is a massive jokester. I guess the people who have worked with you know that, but either in the band or at the store.
Anybody that's been around me for more than 10
totally
minutes,
like I probably have 24 videos of you scaring people on my phone.
I have a folder on my phone of just nothing but scares. Yeah. You remember my clown mask? I've got it in the other room, and I pull it out and scare people.
And I remember my favorite prank kind of you played on anybody at the store when you were working was we worked with our delivery guys were from this rehab group, this rehab house.
I know where you're going.
We would get guys that were going through drug and alcohol rehab to deliver furniture for us, and it was an awesome partnership. But we had this other guy that was managing our store. And he was a little bit gullible. He's awesome. If you're listening, you're off, Daniel. You're an awesome guy. We loved having you, but a little bit gullible.
Yep.
And Jim, one time somebody brought to him one of those little, like a Ziploc bag that's got the hazardous material symbol on the outside.
They brought me a bunch of syringes to measure paint with. Like I was telling him, I needed something where I could do millimeters, milliliters and whatnot.
He took one of those and put some Mountain Dew in it, and with a black Sharpie on the outside wrote, I got one of the guy's name, like it was his drug test, his pee test or whatever, and stuck it in the refrigerator. And he called Daniel over there and opened. He's like, Daniel, what is this? What is this Ziploc bag? And what'd you do? Did you open it up? Or?
Well, I was like, is that urine? Is that a sample? He's like, oh my gosh. And I was like, wait a second. Open it up and went, that's it. It doesn't taste like it. I was just freaking out. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, so then I just started chasing him around the store with a bag of Mountain Dew. Then he caught on.
But anyway, is there a story that you can think of on the tour bus? Do you have a favorite tour bus story?
Man, there was so many things we did. One of my favorites was at the end of a week or wherever we would do per diem, and we'd do it for the road crew guys, and so you have to sign a sheet, and then you collect, whatever money, and it would be so they could get extra food, or if we had an afternoon off, want to go to the movies or whatever. And so I went to Spencer's. They had a set of a stapler, a pen, and something else, but they were shockers. So, click it. And man, if you've never been hit with it, I mean, you'll feel it up your arm. So I just put that pen by the per diem sheet and set up my camera and just sat there and waited. And I mean, we got people shocking the fool out of themselves. And then at the end of every tour, I collected 2 or 3 tour posters, and I'd get every artist to sign them, whether it was Smitty, Amy Grant, Skillet, whatever. And then I would donate a couple of them to some of my friends that have youth group ministries, and they'd auction them off. And then I'd keep one just for my collection to put up. So I remember one time I went to Skillet, and John was there. And of course, he pulls out a Sharpie. And I'm like, well, I actually like ballpoint pen on them, which no one would want that, but he didn't know. So he grabs that sucker and goes, Gag! And throws that pin about 30 feet. He's like, what happened? What? He's just freaking out. And I'm like, you're this screaming tough dude. And you're like, you hurt my hand, So we just ragged on him. Anytime we would see him, we just picked on him. So it was always something like that. But gosh, gags. There was a ton of them that, we'd always have. There was one tour we had dry ice. And if you've never seen dry ice versus fog machine, it floats through the yard. Dry ice is cold, so it hovers, and it's like, what the monsters walk through, those kind of things. And so every night you're done, you'd have dry ice left over. And if you mix dry ice with water, that's what makes that fog. Well, if you put that in a water bottle and you close the lid, in about 3 minutes, that thing explodes like a cannon. And so David Crowder was on the road with us, and Crowder's dudes they are different dudes. I'm just saying. I mean, in a good way. Love them all, man. But they would set up a little, what they call the tiki lounge. And wherever we set up the thing, they would pull out, a canopy, and they'd have, palm tree stuff and tiki lights and all this. And they'd just put up lounge stuff. Well, one time they brought out a pool, a swimming pool, inflatable pool. And it was like 12 feet across. And they run water in that thing for hours and get it full. And it was in Phoenix. And just, if you've never been in Phoenix in the summer, hell ain't got a chance against Phoenix. It was, So everybody would get in that. So I just took one of those after a while and threw it in the pool. And that sucker goes off, and it's like a torpedo hit something, boom. And one dude jumped out, fell down, skidded about 20 feet. Another dude ran smack into the side of the bus. So it was just, anytime you could mess with people on the road, that's what gave you joy. And Amy Grant was pretty fun to pick on too, because she was just kind of, again, gullible. I'm like, you've been on the road how long, and ain't nobody picked on you like this? So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, if you couldn't make fun of yourself or make fun of someone else, then it wasn't a successful tour.
Yeah, cool. Well, man, thanks for being with us. It was awesome. Thanks for sharing stories.
Yeah.
And man, thanks for being such a great dude, like such a great friend. I went through some hard times with you, man, and some of
we both did.
Some of the hardest times of my life, and you were always there. Like I knew when I showed up at the store and walked in, not knowing what to do next, I knew that you would be there to support me and encourage me. And if nothing else, man, thanks so much for being who you are, and thanks for that awesome piano lick. How did that come up? Do you remember?
Well, when we decided to do it slow, I don't remember how I wish we would have recorded and kept a fast version of Imagine, just, for the fun of it. But when we were doing slow, we're like, well, we kind of need an intro thing. And I tell people, this is how it's a God thing. It was the first thing I played. And it wasn't something I had practiced and played over and over. In the movie, there's an outtake. If you just watch the movie, you see what it is. But if you buy it or download it, there's all kinds of deleted scenes. And I always recommend people watch those because it fills in a little bit more of the story. But there's this one scene where Bart's talking to one of the guys in a church auditorium, and we try to do it fast, and he's kind of walking out discouraged, and I'm just noodling on the piano, and that comes out. Bart's like, wait, what'd you just play? And that wasn't really how it happened, but it was kind of where it just happened. I'm like, okay, we need an intro, blah, ding, 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 and it just came out. And matter of fact, when that one pastor asked us to play it, I'm like, geez, can I remember what is it? Trying to refigure out my own lick to play.
Yeah.
So,
and now as soon as those few notes play, you can see people, they just perk up and like, oh, I love this song.
So let me tell you another fun thing on that. When we would be playing churches, a lot of times you're doing sound check, and there'd be certain people that kind of sneak in, or church employees, and they'd sit in out in the pews. And so anytime they do it, I was like, all right, here we go. So I'd play that first lick, and they'd like, here it goes, right practice. And I go, bling, bling, bling.
Oh, I know you've done that to me a few times.
Bling, bling,
right?
bling. And I would hit the note that just make your head twitch.
Yeah,
and just
right.
like, oh man, do y'all remember how it goes? And they were just like, oh my gosh, he butchered the lick. I'm like, I'm allowed to butcher the lick. It's our song.
Yeah, right. You've actually done that to me a few times, like when we would be sitting around and say, oh man, just play it. Just play that lick. And that's what you do. I'm like, dang, man.
Yeah, the keyboard player
You're so looking
playing at one
forward
of
to
our one of our VIP nights. He goes, hey man, sit down and play that lick. I'm like, hey monkey, go play the lick, monkey. I'm like, okay. So I messed it up. Just what? How dare you?
It's painful though, because you're just so anticipating it, and then it's like, oh man,
yep.
Terrible. But anyway, that's Jim Bryson for you. So thanks for being with us. Any last minute thoughts, Buckley?
Yeah, Jim, man, thanks so much for being here. It's
glad to do it. Yeah,
love y'all's music. You know, you're buddies with Kevin. That means you're good in my book. So we appreciate you being here, man. Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us with this episode with Jim Bryson. And hop on, do us a favor. The best thing you can do for anybody that podcasts is like and share on our Facebook kind of raw live, or give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That would help us out a ton. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Kingdom Effect.